Welcome to today's episode where we're talking about hyperbaric oxygen therapy. Briefly explained, you're placed in a chamber where there is normally close to 100% pure oxygen and multiple atmospheres of pressure. There's a couple types, one where the entire chamber is oxygen pressurized, and then another one where the chamber has regular air and then you breathe pure oxygen through a mask. Now, hyperbaric oxygen therapy actually has quite an interesting history. The first use of hyperbaric technology for medicine dates back to 1662, where a British physician named Nathaniel Henshaw used therapy for patients with pulmonary and digestive issues. However, this was not a pure oxygen chamber, nor did he have patients breathe through an oxygen mask, because oxygen hadn't been discovered yet. So he just pressurized a chamber of air. However, in 1774, oxygen is discovered, which is part of this. And another strange component of HBOT's history is it's related to the origins of scuba diving, being able to pressurize oxygen and maintain balance between gases and pressures in changing environments. So an important step was that in 1819, the first deep sea diving suit was invented, which I believe was the old school kind where there was a pump aboard the ship and a long tube that was maintaining pressure to the person diving. Now, the first hyperbaric chamber, the first true hyperbaric chamber for medicinal purposes was in 1834, and I believe they began increasing the amounts of oxygen in the decades that followed. This didn't really get much public interest until the mid-1960s, but more and more medicinal uses of it were found. It was being used to cure, I believe, cyanide poisoning. Carbon monoxide poisoning is a huge one. It helped with gangrene infections, and for some reason it could help faster recovery times after surgeries. Then we come to today, where hyperbaric oxygen therapy is perhaps the most effective modality against aging and age-related disease. So, to run through the research pretty quickly, I've linked my paper down below if you guys want to read it. The flagship study for hyperbaric oxygen therapy is that it has the ability to lengthen telomeres. Telomeres, briefly explained, are long sequences of nucleic acids at the end of your chromosomes that help protect the DNA from degradation. So what telomeres do is they protect your DNA against damage upon somatic cell division. So that is, you've probably heard something along the lines of your body totally replaces its cells, every 7 to 9 years, depending on the type. And that's somewhat true, but then it begs the question, why do we age? Because if the body was perfectly able to replicate itself every few years, you should be completely refreshed. And one of the main theories behind it, although it is just a theory, is that the telomeres, which are your DNA protectors essentially, during division, shorten because some parts of those nucleic acids are lost. And that means that over time, the number of cycles that your body can replicate itself, I'm talking about parts of cells, degrades, and the integrity of the chromosome or the DNA degrades with time as you replicate more and more. But telomeres are meant to protect against that. So, how does hyperbaric oxygen therapy get involved? Well, in a study, 35 healthy adults, now to be fair, they were all in the older age group, they were over 64. They received 60 hyperbaric oxygen therapy treatments, and they were looking at blood cells. Now this is limited, of course, because they're only looking at blood cells. They didn't do an analysis of other body parts. But in the blood cells, specifically in immune cells, in T helper, T cytotoxic, natural killer, and B cells, telomere lengths all increased by over 20% after 60 hyperbaric oxygen sessions. I believe the sessions were an hour and a half with some air breaks every 20 minutes, and I believe it was 60 days straight, although you can fact check that as well. But that's a common protocol for the studies at 2 atmospheres of pressure. Cellular senescence, which is where some cells later in life or due to DNA or telomere lengthening damage, will stop replicating themselves. They sort of just hang out, and they're also known as zombie cells. Cellular senescence in T helper cells decreased by over 35% in the study, and cytotoxic T cells senescence decreased by over 10%. So this was a huge study indicating that hyperbaric oxygen therapy might have the possibility to slow your aging cellularly. And another important note for this study that I think is interesting is that it is in immune cells, which, while that's limited in that immune cells are ones that are more commonly, made and replicated, and your body's making a lot of immune cells when it gets infected, and the values fluctuate, right, compared to something like bone cells, which is a little bit more stable. If you're able to protect the immune system from aging, that likely means you're going to have a healthier immune system for longer. And having a healthier immune system means that you're less likely to get other age-related issues, such as cancer or the increase of infections that a lot of people, as they age, start to have. So, huge possible benefits. That really was like the flagship study, which, if you follow anything about biohacking and longevity, you've probably heard of HBOT, primarily because this study kind of broke it into that field. Now, in a separate study, they looked at skin aging. Skin samples of 5 by 5 millimeters were taken, and it was in an area not related to sunlight. So I believe they took it from like the inner thigh. And the reason for this is they wanted to examine hyperbaric oxygen therapy's effects on intrinsic skin aging, so not related to photo damage. They had a control group and a treatment group, and they went for 60 daily sessions, and at 100% oxygen, 2 atmospheres of pressure for 90 minutes with air breaks. Again, that's a very common protocol we'll see. And they found a statistically significant decrease in fiber fragmentation and papillary layer thickness, no change in density or thickness of elastic fibers. However, a significant increase in elastic fiber length and a significant increase in collagen density. So, hyperbaric oxygen therapy is one of the best ways to prevent skin aging, it seems, at least intrinsic skin aging. And this begs the question, why does all this work? So very interestingly, hyperbaric oxygen therapy likely acts as something called a hormetic stressor. Hormetic stressors are essentially mild stressors that are beneficial for the body because they promote the body's own strength response. Great example is exercise or fasting. You're stressing the body when you exercise, but it means that your body will express genes and will, rebuild tissues and all of that in ways that make it stronger. So that's what a hormetic stressor is. And hyperbaric oxygen therapy may act as a hormetic stressor for your antioxidant genes. So you have antioxidant genes, and those are meant to create things that are antioxidants or prevent against oxidative damage. Now, in one study, they took human endothelial cells and compared to control group and a non-control group, an experimental group. And they tested the mRNA immediately after treatment or 24 hours after treatment. And they were looking at antioxidant gene expression. And the results you can see in this chart here indicate that hyperbaric oxygen therapy likely increases the antioxidant gene expression. And so one of the possible mechanisms for hyperbaric oxygen therapy is that it could be acting as a mild hormetic stressor against your antioxidant genes, because you would think that flooding yourself with oxygen would increase the amount of oxidative damage. But it is possible that that stimulus increases your body's own natural antioxidant response, and then that may protect you over time. Another interesting finding was that hyperbaric oxygen therapy has an effect on cognitive function. In a rat study, they found that hyperbaric oxygen chamber therapy had restorative effects on cognitive damage. Now, this was using a D-galactose model, which is very common to induce cognitive aging in rats. It's not a perfect model, but it does seem to mimic some of the effects of natural aging. So they include a D-galactose treatment, which creates an aged group and then an unaged group. And then they were comparing hyperbaric oxygen therapy. And one of the things that they found in the study, they were also looking at a lean group of rats and then a obese group of rats. And what they found was that hyperbaric oxygen therapy actually helps to restore insulin sensitivity in both the unaged and the aged group, and can therefore aid with obesity. And the cognitive benefits were found in both groups, although in slightly different amounts. Additionally, they did another rat study and found that it has anti-osteoporotic effects. Same thing, they separated an obese and a lean rat group, and once again, the insulin sensitivity increased in the rats. So it is likely able to help reverse issues with insulin sensitivity as well. Hyperbaric oxygen therapy then is likely one of the ways of the future, one of the medical modalities by which aging and age-related disease can be prevented. I've linked the paper down below if you guys want to take a look at the whole thing, or I can make a part 2 diving more into the research. But I hope you guys enjoyed learning about HBOT, and let me know your thoughts in the comments. This is ProGain Knowledge. I'll see you guys later.